Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Kuf Yud, as we come to the conclusion of the ninth parak, or coming closer to the conclusion of the ninth parak of Bava Kamma. Let me share my screen and we'll get fully started. Today, we're going to primarily discuss the rule of what happens if one steals from a convert who dies before the funds are returned, in particular when dealing with somebody who has sworn falsely as well. But before we get to that in the coming Mishnah, and we began discussing that a little bit yesterday, so we're going to be touching on some of the adjacent issues that are related to this. And so that in particular that relate to Kohanim, because the answer to the what happens to the funds is going to be that it goes to the Kohanim. So we'll get the details of that in a moment, but let's pick up now at the two dots, fifth line from the bottom of Kuftet Amud Bet. So Tan Rabbanan, the Gemara tells us that the rabbis taught in a brisa, Minayin lechoin shabam umakriv karbonosav b'chol eis b'chol sha'ah sheyirtza. How do I know that a Kohen has the right, even if he's not on duty, to come and offer his own sacrifices whenever he wants? He does not need to utilize the Kohanim that are on duty. Talmud Lomar uva b'chol avas nafsho v'sheres, that the Torah says in two consecutive psukim in Dvarim Parak Yudchet, v'chi yavoa elevi me'achad she'arecha mikol Yisrael asher hu gar b'sham uva b'chol avas nafsho el hamakom asher yivchar Hashem. So this Levi is going to come now. We understand that this is being understood to refer to the Kohanim, and they're going to come whenever they want with their gift. This Sheres is the next pasuk. It says Sheres b'shem Hashem, and they're going to serve. And so the point is that member of the tribe of Levi, who's actually a Kohen, is going to be able to serve when he comes at any time that he comes with the gift that he wants to bring. So that is the lesson that we take from that. And how do I know that avodasa? Now, avodasa could mean it's service, but what we're referring to is the gifts that are associated with the service. So if we take a look at Rashi, where is that Rashi? Avodasa. It's actually in the top of the. We'll have it in the coming up, but the avodah sa is a reference. Is a ref. Oh no, there it is. The third line from the very bottom. I'm sorry. Avodah sa stachar avodah sa dahainu bisara. Third line from the very bottom in Rashi. When we say avodah sa, we mean the reward for its service. And that's referring to the meat. So how do I know that Kohen who's bringing his own sacrifice will be able to be the one who gets the meat and the skin and the hide to that sacrifice? Talmud Lomar v'ish es kodoshav lo yiyu, that a man's holy shall be his own. So that's referring to the fact that the Kohen who brings his own carbon gets to have it. So so how do we apply this? So im hayabalmum. Now, what if the Kohen who is offering the offering had a blemish, so he's not allowed to make the offering himself? No Kohen shabaose mishmar. He will give the Kohen who happens to be in that particular mishmar, in that particular watching, meaning the Kohanim were broken up into I think 24 different groups. And so each of the groups would have a particular week that they would serve, and everyone would come and serve during the holidays, but each of them would have their own week. And so the Kohanim that were on duty that week, they would be the ones who would offer the korban, but the meat and its hide would belong to him. So v'im haya zakein ochola, and if he was old or not well, so he was sick, so he wasn't able to bring the korban. No salachol kohen sheyirtza, he would give it to whomever he wanted, meaning he didn't necessarily have to give it to to one of the Kohanim who were on duty, and we're going to ask about that in a moment. But the meat and the hide would go to the people in that watching. So we're going to ask about that also, because why is this Kohen subject to an exception that it goes to the people of the Mishmar, not to him? So what is this case of the older sick Kohen? Say avid avoda, if he's able to perform the sacrifice, so then avoda sava oranami to have a day. So then the meat and the hide should belong to him. So why does it go to the mishmar? And if he's not able to perform the service, how is he able to appoint any Kohen that he wants? Shouldn't he have to give it to the Kohen of that particular mishmar? So Amar of Papa sheyachol la'asos al yedei hadchak. The answer is that he's able to offer the sacrifice and to eat the sacrifice with a great deal of difficulty. It's not something that he would want to be able to do, but not that he'd be able to do easily. And so as a result, when it comes to the avodah, al yedei hadchak avodahi, when you do a service, the service in the Beis HaMikdash, even if it takes a lot of work and you're really working very hard in order to make it successful, that is considered a valid service. And so that's why he's able to appoint someone. In general, in Judaism, we have a principle that you're only allowed to appoint somebody as a shliach for something that you yourself can do. If you can't do it, then you would not be able to appoint a shliach. And so that's the idea here, that he can do it. It's just with a great deal of difficulty. But when it comes to achila, when we say that somebody is eating something with a great deal of difficulty, that is considered an act of achila gasa. Achila gasa refers to the concept of eating when you are already full. And so as a result, that's not a valid eating. I can't help but think of the Romans, etc., that they would eat when they were already full, because that was not which is a disgusting considered act that isn't even considered eating according to Judaism. And so v'achila gasa lav klumhu, that kind of eating is not considered a valid eating. So note the difference. When it comes to the sacrificial service itself, if you can do it with difficulty, it's considered a valid service. And so that's why the Kohen can appoint an agent. But when it comes to the eating, that kind of eating is not considered a valid eating. And so as a result, he can't appoint an agent for the meat and for the hide, because they don't go to him, because he doesn't have the ability to eat it. And so that's the story. Okay, so we have that. Now, interestingly, just as an aside, I'll note that Tosfos here discusses the potential ramifications of this for Pesach, where when you're very full at the end of the Pesach Seder and you're supposed to eat the afikomen with a sense of desire, etc. If what we're saying right now is that this kind of eating is not a valid eating, so how does that all jive with the fact that over there it seems to imply that it is a valid eating? And the answer is that there can be different. The simplest answer is that there can be different kinds of achila gasa, that there's an achila gasa when you're absolutely totally full and you can't eat anything, and that's the kind of achila gasa that we're talking about here, where it's just the person is old and they're not able to eat the sufficient amount of meat to make it a valid eating at all, without incredible difficulty. Whereas over there, when we say that it's still, you still perform the mitzvah, even if it's not the ideal form of mitzvah, that we're talking about where you're able to eat it and it's not so difficult. So those are just a couple of the issues that come up. But now we're going to cite a similar teaching of Rav Sheshes, similar to the brisa that we learned, and where we have a similar question that's asked. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about as we go.
So just to clarify, this person is a individual is appointing a Kohen, and the Kohen is then appointing another Kohen, because he the first Kohen cannot do it, so he gives it to a second Kohen? Is that what's happening here?
No, we're talking about you skip the first part of your statement. It's just a Kohen is bringing his own korban. Could be any of a variety of different kinds of korbanot, and he himself is able to do the service, but it takes a lot of work, and he's able to eat it, but it would take a lot of work. So when it comes to the service, that's still considered sufficient as a valid service, and so he has the ability to appoint anyone he wants to serve, any Kohen that he wants to serve as his Kohen for bringing it. But because his eating would not be a valid eating, he's stuck with giving it to the people of that particular mishmar, of that particular watching. He doesn't get to give it to the person that he wants. Unlike, if we go back just for 2 seconds to the bottom of Kuftet Mabet, when it came to the person who had a blemish, well, of course, the person with the blemish does not have the ability to offer a sacrifice. And so as a result, he has to have the Kohanim that are on that mishmar. They have to be the one that serves it. But on the other hand, when it comes to the eating and the skin, it belongs to him because he has no problem with respect to eating. He's still considered a Kohen, and he's still considered somebody who's tahor, so he's able to eat it. So that's the story with respect to that. So the key is that what we've learned here is that we might have thought that you want to look at the offering and the eating as a single combined act. And the answer is no, you look at each of them individually, and can the person do that particular piece? If they can appoint an agent, and if they can't, they cannot appoint an agent. And now we're going to get the same concept with Rav Sheshes. So Amar Rav Sheshes, as we pick up, we're now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down in Kuf Yod Amud Aleph. Amar Rav Sheshes, Im haya Kohen tamei b'korban sibur. If there was a Kohen who was tamei and he wanted to bring a communal offering, nosna l'chol mishiyirtza. He can give it to whomever he wants. Va'avodasa va'ora la'anshe mishmar. But when it comes to the hide and the meat, the meat and the hide, that has to go to the people of that watching. So hey Chidami, 1 second, what kind of case is Rav Sheshes talking about? Because if there are Kohanim that are tahor, so Tameya mimatzu avde, would this Kohen who's Tameh be able to offer it? As Rashi points out, Tameya mimatzu avde, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. The Kevan de lo matzu avde matzu avde shliach echi mashave. So see, since he's not able to do it himself, how could he possibly offer it as a korban? Meaning this Kohen is tamei, and so he can't offer the korban himself. And yet Rav Sheshes said that he could give it to anyone he wanted. And moreover, the deleka tahorim. And if you tell me, well, there are no Kohanim that are tahor in this particular watching or in that particular moment. So va'avavadasa va'ora la'anshe mishmar. Well, 1 second. Well, then why would they reward for the service, the meat and the hide, go to the people in that mishmar? Meaning they're tamei hatameim ninhu v'lo matzu aklu. They're tamei and they can't eat it. So Amar Rava clarifies what Rav Sheshes was talking about. So we're dealing with a situation where all of the Kohanim of the Mishmar who are not Balmum, who are unblemished, they all are Tamei, but there are Kohanim in the Mishmar who are Tahor, but they happen to be blemished. So as a result, they're only Kohanim that are able to offer the sacrifice are those who are Tamei. And so as a result, this Tamei Kohen has the ability to appoint another Tamei Kohen as an agent because there is no choice other than to have Kohanim Tameim bring their sacrifice. But when it comes to eating, there is a choice because we have Balmum Kohanim who are Tahor that are able to eat it. And so as a result, therefore, it has to go to the Mishmar and it cannot go to the person of the Tamei Kohen's choosing. Okay, so that was rule number 2. And we now have a third statement, again, similar statement, this time by Rav Ashi. And Rav Ashi says, Im haya Kohen Gadol, Rav Ashi, im haya Kohen Gadol, onain, if the Kohen Gadol was an onain, meaning that he had just recently had somebody pass away in his immediate family. And so as a result, he's expected to be involved in their burial. And as a result, he's not supposed to offer a korban. He can give it to any Kohen that he wants to. But the meat and the hide, they go to the whoever's working in that mission. So again, what's the idea is that he technically has the ability to offer, just to make it clear what the implication of this statement is, right? The Kohen Gadol can give it to another Kohen that he wants because he himself has the ability, even though he's an onain, to continue to offer his own offering. But when it comes to the eating, he doesn't have the ability to eat, and that's why it goes to the mishmar. So now the Gemara wonders, my kamashmalan, we have a brisa that, why is Rav Ashi telling us this? Tanina, we've got a brisa that tells us it. So Kohen Gadol, Makriv Onain. A Kohen Gadol is allowed to bring a korban while he is in Onain. So that tells us the first part, that the Kohen can give it to whomever he wants because he's still not he's still eligible. But he does not eat. Well, that tells us the second part of Rav Ashi's statement, because that tells us that he has to give the meat to the people of that Mishnah. And he does not take a share to eat at night. So even though you might have thought that he would, so he doesn't. But the bottom line is what is Rav Ashi telling us that we can't figure out on our own from this baraisa? So Salka Daita Chamina, the Gemara tells us this is what I would have thought. Ki chasrach mana alei de Kohen Gadol. Maybe the reason that the Kohen Gadol is allowed to continue to offer the sacrifices because the Torah wants to be kind to to this Kohen Gadol who's just suffered a loss in his family. So lekrovehu. So they say that you can bring the sacrifice. But maybe when it comes to appointing an agent, lo matzi mashave, we would not allow him to appoint an agent. Kamash Malan. And so that's why Rav Ashi wants to go out of his way to tell us that in fact we would allow him to appoint an agent. And it's fully consistent with the concept that if you're able to do it yourself, you can appoint an agent. So those were the first three lessons that we shared, again, all connecting to the rights of the Kohanim. And now we dive into this concept of Hagozel as Hager, that one who robs a convert. So let's take a look. Hagozel as Hager v'nishbalo. If you rob a convert, or somebody robs a convert, and then swears falsely about it, umes, and now the convert dies before, and obviously here does not leave any children, so as a result, there are no heirs. So as a result, now ordinarily the money of such a convert becomes available to the public and is completely free and hefker. But here, and so, but we don't, but on some level, the Torah doesn't want this robber to get away with keeping the stuff that he's supposed to get. So this robber needs to pay the principal and the 1/5 to the Kohanim, the asham lemizbeach, and he has to bring an asham korban to the altar. And of course, that really doesn't change whether the convert died or not, but that's also part of what's required. The key here, though, is that the principal and the 1/5 goes to the Kohanim. And how do we know all this? Because it tells us it in Sefer Bamidbar. If a person has no redeemers, and we understand that a person with no redeemers means that they have no relatives, so that can only refer to a convert. So lahashiv ha'asham elav. So and therefore there's no ability to return the asham to him. Hasham hamushav la'ashem lekohen. That the guilt gets returned to God and to the Kohen. So milvad, and that is separate from El HaKippurim Asher Yichaper Bo Alav. That's separate from the ram of atonement, which will come to provide atonement for him. So we see that there are, we'll see in the Gemara how this verse refers, there's a reference to the principle. There's a reference to the 1/5, and of course, what's the clearest is the end of that pasuk makes a clear reference to the korban that one would need to offer. So now let's take a look at some detailed cases. So haya mala es hakesef ve'es ha'asham. So we got this robber who's bringing up the money and the asham to Yerushalayim, umes, and he dies on the way. The robber dies. Hakesef yinasein levanav. So now all the money gets given to his sons. Now, why is that? If we take a look at Rashi on the Mishnah, the second, so we can do both the first Rashi and the second Rashi. So pick up at Haya Ma'alas Esa Kesef Umes. But Derek, we're talking about where he dies along the way. So Hakesef Yunasin Lebanav. So even though he's on the way, the money will go to his sons. Shel Gazlan of the robber. Because really, when the convert dies, the robber really becomes like the owner of these items because there is no claimant against him. But he needs to do this returning. And so therefore the Torah tells him that he has to do the returning as part of his tshuva process to the Kohanim. Because that's how he's going to have atonement, ashvuasei, on the fact that he swore falsely. Because the only time, as we've seen previously, that you can bring the korban asham if you have if you swore falsely is after you've already returned the item to the proper owner. But v'hashta suleka kapara. But this person, now that he's passed away, Kavan Demesle, since he's died, there is no possibility for further atonement. His death is whatever atonement is necessary. And so as a result, that's why the money will go to the robber's sons, and essentially he'll be able to profit from it. But when it comes to the asham korban, which has been set aside, so then that will have to graze until it develops a blemish, and then we'll sell it, and we'll sell it, and it will go into the box of Nedavot, which is a special box of funds that were used to buy korbanot, so that there would always be something cooking on the altar. That as long, we wouldn't want the altar to remain unoccupied, and so if there was ever a time where it wasn't occupied, other sacrifices would be brought from this donation box. So nasan hakesef anshe mishmar umes. So now, case number 2, the robber brings the money and he's given it to the people of that particular watching, and before he offers the sacrifice, he now dies. So Eina Yorshin Yecholim Lahotzim Yadim. The heirs can't get it out of their hands. It's already been returned. Shenemar ish asher yitain la kohen lo yiyah. That what a person gives to the kohen belongs to the kohen, and so as a result, that's he's not going to be able to get it. His family is not going to be able to get it back. So nasan hakesav lehoyariv v'asham liyodaya. So now we're going to deal with the fact that there are different mishmarot, and Rashi tells us mishmeret Yehoyarav that rishona l'kol mishmarot v'shal yediyah akareha. So these are two mishmarot that are one after the other. And so what happens if you gave the money to the first one and you brought the asham with the second one? Well, then yatsa, that works. And of course, the principle that we'll see is that you have to give the money before you bring the korban, because again, the korban only works for the atonement if you've actually returned the funds. But asham la yahorav, the chesav la yodaya, if you bring the asham with the first group and you give the money to the second group, then the following, im kayam ha'asham, if the animal has not yet been offered when you gave the money to the second group, yakriva b'nei yudaya, then the second group will need to bring it, so that they are clearly bringing it after the money has been returned. The imlo, but if in fact the asham has already been offered before the money is given to the second group, Yachzer v'yavi asham acher, you need to bring another korban, because the korban shamevi gzelo ad shelo yashamo yatza, because if you return the robbery before you bring the asham, you're fine, and you can bring the asham later. But hevi ashamo ad shelo hevi gzelo lo yatza. But if you bring the korban asham before you return the money, the robbery, so then you are not, you have not fulfilled your obligation, and you need to bring another asham. So nasan asa keren velo nasan asa rechomish. Now, what happens? Can you remember that you're obligated, because we swore, the person swore falsely? He's obligated not only to bring the principal, but also to bring the 1/5. So what happens if he only brought the principal and he didn't bring the 1/5? So Eina Chomish Ma'akiv. If Nasan is a Karen below Nasan is a Chomish, Eina Chomish Ma'akiv. If he brought only the principle of the robbery, the thing that was stolen, or the its value if it's no longer in existence, so then but he didn't bring the 1/5 penalty, so then that's okay if he brought the korban asham. Okay, so that is our Mishnah. Now we're going to teach a series of brisas that help us understand how the psukim tell us that clearly what we're talking about is a case of robbery and not anything else. So
who's bringing the? I'm sorry. We talked about a case where the Gazlan died on the way. So who's bringing the korban, the asham, and the chomish?
Thank you for raising. We're clarifying when we then talk about, when we go to the case of Nasan HaKesav LaHoyora Ba'asham Liyadaya, we're returning. Thank you for clarifying that. We're returning to the case where the robber doesn't die. So now again, the robber's alive and he's bringing both the money and the asham. The key is, as we learn at the end of our Mishnah, is that he must give the money before he brings the asham. That's the lesson. But you're absolutely right that I should have clarified that we're now returning to the case of where the robber is alive at the end of the Mishnah. When we talk about giving it to the different mishmarot, we're definitely talking about where the robber is once again alive. So a little tchias hamesim, so to speak, because we talked about where he died in the middle, but we're now going back to a case where he is alive. Okay, so now we're going to have a couple of brisas that are taught that are each going to highlight different aspects of the psukim. So Tana Rabbanan, Asham Zeh Keren, that when the Torah refers to Asham, that's referring to the principle. Hamushav Zeh Chomish. And then when we say that the Mushav, again, the Pasuk says, let's go back to the Pasuk, V'im ein le'ish goel. If a person has no redeemer, so the person we say that such a person must be a ger, that because everybody has some relatives. Lahashiv ha'asham elav, so that the item can be the asham, and that's what we're going to say is the principle can be returned to him. Ha'asham hamushav, the asham, the principle, and the mushav, which is the 1/5 payment. LaHashem, la kohen, they go to the kohen. Milvad ela kippurim, and that's in addition to the ram of atonement. So now the Gemara continues. So hamushav zeh chomish. So eno ela asham zeh ayil. How do I know? Of course, the word asham often means in the Torah the sacrifice itself. So how do I know that the asham here isn't referring to the sacrifice? So now, a quick interruption and an aside. Well, my nafkamina, what difference does it make whether the asham is referring to the principle or to the sacrifice? The point is that if it were to refer to the sacrifice, then that would teach us something different from what Rava teaches. The Amar Rava, Gazal Hager, Shachaziro Balayla, that because we refer to the principle as an asham, we're going to learn principles of, and I've used principle in two ways, principle with an A, P-A-L, that the asham refers to the main, to the return of the principle of the main payment. And then because it's connected with the principle, P-L-E, of the sacrifice, so that's going to teach us certain principles associated with the return. And so the first of them is Gazal Hager Shechziro B'Layla. If you return it at night, Lo Yatza, you have not fulfilled your obligation. And Hechziro Chatza and Lo Yatzin. And if you return half of the principal, you are not going to have, or a portion of the principal, you're not going to have fulfilled your obligation. And so as a result, if you brought a korban in the meantime, you have not satisfied the asham, and you need to bring a new one. And my time, why is it that the return of the principal at night and the return of a portion of the principal is not going to be sufficient? Because asham karya rachmana, the Torah refers to the payment as an asham. And so if, in fact, the asham of that verse was referring actually to the korban, so then we wouldn't be able to learn Rava's lesson. So anyway, but now we go back to the question, how do I know that it's not referring to the korban? Because Keshehu Omer, Milvad El HaKippurim, when we then refer to the Ram of Atonement, Havi Omer Asham Zekeren. So that's how we know that that's referring to the Asham korban. So now when we said Asham earlier, it must refer to the principal payment itself.
Is that a gezerah that it can't be returned at night? It can only be returned during the day?
That is the lesson that Rava learns. It's not a gezerah. He thinks that it is taught from the Torah, that because the Torah refers to the principle as an asham, the other rules associated with asham must apply to it. Now, it's not completely clear. I don't know whether we actually paskin like this Rava. It does seem like we do, but I'm not 100% sure. But that's certainly it seems like we're learning lessons associated with it from the fact that we use the term asham for it.
No, I'm saying that does it mean that in general that returning something at night is not valid? It has to be
no,
returned during the day?
Only when you
return during the day?
Only if you return it to the Kohanim. So only in the case of Gezel Ager, where it was stolen from robbed from a convert, and then the convert asks for it back, and you swear that you don't owe it to them, and then you swear falsely and the person swears falsely that they don't owe it to them, and then the convert dies, and so as a result, the principal and the 1/5 payment are all supposed to go to the Kohanim. That is where Rava's statement would apply. In an ordinary case of a robber returning something, that would not be the lesson. You would not have to return it during the daytime. You could return it even at night. Okay, so now Tanya Edich, another brisa associated with this same verse, Asham Zekeren. Again, the Asham referred to in the pasuk is referring to the principal. Hamushav Zechomish, and the Mushav refers to the 1/5 charge. Oeno ella asham zechomish. How do I know that maybe the asham is not referring to the 1/5? After all, the asham refers to the atonement, and the 1/5 is also part of the atonement. So maybe that's what's referring to it. So l'may nafkamina, again, what difference does it make? It would tell us that it was what we say in our Mishnah is not true, because we said in our Mishnah it's not nasan lo asa karen below nasan lo asa chomesh ein chomesh ma'akev, that if you give back the principal and you don't give back the 1/5, well then that's okay. You can still bring your asham korban and it will be a valid korban. But if in fact we were to say that the asham itself refers to the 1/5, well then we wouldn't allow it to you to do it. Adarabba chomesh ma'akev, we would say the exact opposite, that the chomesh would be required. After all, it's called atonement. So obviously we don't in fact refer to it as atonement. So keshehu omer v'heshiv es ashamo b'rosho chamishiso, that when it says in the previous pasuk that it says that and he'll return the asham and birosho in its principal, in its head amount, v'chamishiso, and its 1/5, it's clear that the ashamo in that verse is referring to something that isn't the chamishiso. It's referring to the main amount. So Havi Omer Asham Zekeren. So that's how we know that Asham must refer to the principal. And now we have the third of our three brisas, Tanya Idach, Asham Zekeren, Hamushav Zechomish. We're getting used to this opening language of the brisas, that the Asham refers to the principal, the Mushav refers to the Chomish, the 1/5, Uvegezel Hager Hakasam Medaber, and it must be talking about stealing from a convert. Einu ella hamushav zek kefil. How do I know? Maybe mushav doesn't refer to 1/5, but it refers to the double payment. And we're really referring to theft from a convert. Because remember, what we're talking about is a situation of according to the way we're understanding this verse, is Gezel Hager. Somebody has robbed the convert. The convert goes to the robber and says, "I want my thing back." The person swears they didn't take it from him, and so as a result, and now wants atonement, and he has to pay back the principal, the 1/5, and bring an asham. But maybe, how do I know that that's what we're talking about? Maybe what we're talking about is where somebody stole from the as a thief from the convert, stole in with a subterfuge. It was stole in the middle of the night, and so as a result, we have no idea who did the stealing, and so as a result, when eventually that person is caught, they have to pay back double. And so maybe that person who needs to pay back double will say that if the convert dies, that money needs to get paid to the Kohanim. So how do I know that it's not a case of theft? Well, the previous verse told us that we were talking about a situation with a principal and a 1/5. So that we're talking about a situation where it's only the principal amount that's paid, along with a 1/5 payment. There is no possibility of a double payment. So therefore, it must be talking about a situation where we're talking about robbery and not theft. Okay, so now the Gemara analyzes Rava's statement that we quoted a little while ago. Gufa Amara, and now actually we don't even analyze it. The Gilyon Ashas points out that sometimes we'll use the term Gufa not to analyze a particular statement, but to bring up other related statements, and that's what we're doing here. Gufa Amarava Gezel Hager Shechaziru Balayla. If you return the theft at night, lo yatsa, you're not fulfilled your obligation of returning the theft, of returning the robbery. Hagaziru hachatza lo yatsa, and we're talking about to the Kohanim, where the ger has already died. And similarly, if you return it impartially, you have not fulfilled your obligation. My taima asham kari rachmana, because the Torah itself calls that payment an asham, so it needs to fulfill the requirements of an asham, namely being during the day and brought completely. So Amar Rava, now we have another statement. We're going to have another statement of Rava, and then I'm sorry, it should say one other teaching, another teaching by Rava, and then 3 questions. So Amar Rava, Gezal Ger She'ein Bo Shava Pruta L'Chol Kohen V'Kohen. If you return the item, again, somebody has robbed a convert and sworn falsely, and now the convert dies, and now the money has to be returned to the Kohanim, and the money that's being returned is not sufficient to give every Kohen on that mishmar at least a pruta, lo yatsa yadei chovaso. You have not fulfilled your obligation. My taima diksuv ha'asham hamushav, that you need to actually return an asham. Ad sheyehei hashava l'kol kohen v'kohen. Every Kohen in that mishmar needs to receive something. So that shows that you, and if you don't receive a pruta, it's not valuable, and so as a result, that's not going to be sufficient. So by Rava, ein b'oleh mishmeret Yeho Yariv. What happens if the amount that is returned is not sufficient for the mishmar of Yeho Yariv, because there are more Kohanim in that mishmar, the Yeshbo, but it was sufficient, or it would be sufficient, l'mishmaret Yedaya, if you were to give it to the Yedaya mishmar. So Mahu, what's the story? So first we have to understand Heichidami. What's the case? As we turned again, we're on Kuf Yud Bet now. Kuf Yud Amabet, excuse me. Ilema di Yahaveli Yedaya b'shmeres Yedaya. If in fact he gave it to the smaller mishmar during the smaller mishmar's watch, ha'izbei, there's sufficient money there for every Kohen, so it works. So lo tzricha diyave liyadaya b'mishmarta diyaho yarib. It must be that we're asking about what happens if he gave it to the smaller mishmar, but it was when the bigger mishmar was still on duty. So miyamrin kaven delav mishmar tohu. Do we say that because it wasn't the right watch below klumhu, you haven't done anything? Odilma kaven delo chazile, or do you say that because it wasn't fit for Yehoyarib, mi'ikara Yadayakai. So as a result, he gave it to Yadaya ahead of time, but in fact, it was sufficient for them, and so therefore it would be good. So teku, we say that in that case, we don't know the answer, so presumably you would need to give it again in order to be able to bring your asha. So by Rava. Now question number 2 from Rava. Rava asks, Kohanim mahu sheyachlaku gezel hager keneged gezel hager. Can you make a trade? Can a group say, listen, part of this mishmar says, listen, I don't want this gezel hager. I'll wait for the next gezel hager, and you take all of this gezel hager. So can you make that kind of trade? Mi amrin an asham karya rachmana. Do we say that because it's called an asham, ma asham ein chok and asham keneged asham, you're not allowed to make those kinds of trades with respect to an asham? Af gezel ein chok and gezel ager keneged gezel ager. Odilma gezel ager mamonahu. Or do we say that gezel ager is just money, and so as a result you can make such a trade? So hadar pashta, Rava then answered it. Asham karya rachmana. Again, pointing out the fact that the principle is called an asham, so as a result, you're not allowed to trade portions. And Rav Acha, Brei de Rava, Masne Le Behedja. And Rav Acha, the son of Rava, taught Rava's statement not as a question and answer, but rather as a statement itself. Amar Rava, Kohanim, Ein Chokim Gezel Ager, Keneged Gezel Ager, My Taima, Asham, Karye Rachmana. That you can't trade one for another because of the fact that the Torah uses the term asham to refer to the payment. Okay, question number 3. By Rava, Kohanim begezel hager yorshin havu. Mikabele matanas havu. When it comes to the inheritor, when it comes to this raw property that of the convert that is going to the Kohanim, do the Kohanim get treated like heirs? And we'll explain why that matters in a moment. Or are they receiving a gift? So what's the nafkamina? What difference does it make? What happens if you stole chametz, if the person robbed chametz, and then Pesach went by? If we say that it's as if they are inheriting the property from the convert, well, listen, when you're returned to the convert himself, you would be allowed to just give the chametz back. Hainu hai de yarse moris. This is what they inherited. So you'd be allowed to give it back, even though it's worthless. The amrat makable matanas havu. And if you tell me, well, listen, they're supposed to get a gift. Matana ka'amarachmana denesav lahu. The Torah told us that we have to give a gift. V'halo kayav lahu midi. And now they haven't been given anything to afra ba'almahu. All they've been giving is earth. So that it's totally worthless. So how can you say that's if it's a gift, then must be that's not going to be working. So Rav Zeira bai hachi. Rav Zeira said the following: Afilu im timse lomer makabli matanahu. Even if you want to say that they're gifts, hello ibailan. It's not clear that you can ask the question about chametz. Dahahi matana amarachmana denesev lahu, because the Torah talked about giving the robber. And so as a result, and here even if the robber gets it gives them something has no value, still they've been given this gift. Elaki coming by on. Where's the question? Kagon shenaflulo eser behemus begezel hager mechayve laafrushi minayu meiser olo. No, the question is it an inheritance or a gift? It determines whether or not the recipients, the Kohanim that receive it, do they have to tithe this, to do animal tithes from the animals that they're getting? So Yorshin Havu, Amar Mar Kanu B'Tfisas Habayas Chayavin, and we have a principle that if you acquire animals as part of an estate, you are obligated to tithe them and to give 1/10 of them, to bring 1/10 of them to the Beis Hamikdash. Oh, Dilma Mekabel Matanos Havu. Or do we say that it's like you got a gift. Utanan halokech v'hanitan lo b'matana pater mamaser behema. That one who gets a gift or buys an animal is not subject to the requirement to tie that animal. So which is it? So Tashma ezrim va'arba matanos kahuna nitnu la'aron uvanav. That there's a brisa that lists the 24 gifts that were given to Aaron and his sons. And the last of those gifts that we'll see in a moment is this gift of the Gezel Hager. And so as a result, we see that it's referred to as a gift. So that teaches us that it must be considered as a gift. And all of these gifts were given as part of a klal prat klal, meaning that, as Rashi says, that they were the kol hamakayim keilu makayim klal prat klal uvris melech, and anybody who fulfills them, it's as if they fulfill every klal prat klal, meaning, as Rashi says, kol Torah kula. It's as if you fulfilled the entire Torah, ubris melech, and every sacrifice. Because every sacrifice had to come with a little bit of salt. So kol ha'over aleihem, and anybody who transgresses them and fails to give these gifts to the Kohanim, ki'ilu over al klal uprado klal ubris melech, and it's as if they violated. The Eluhain, Eser b'mikdash, there are 10 in the mikdash, v'ar b'Yerushalayim, and 4 in Yerushalayim, the Eser b'Gvulim, and then 10 in the outer areas of the Israel. Eser b'mikdash, chatas b'heim v'chatas ha'ov v'asham v'adai v'asham tali v'zilchei shalmei tzibur v'log shemen shal mitzorah v'umosar ha'omer ushtei halechem v'lechem apanim and ushiyare menachos. So these are the 10 gifts. We won't go through all of them due to the time, but the point is that there are 10 of them. The Arba Yerushalayim, there are 4 gifts in Yerushalayim: Habachor, V'Habib Kurim, V'Hamuram Min HaTorah, V'El Nazir, V'Orot Kadashim, V'Asara Gvulin. And then there are 10 in the provinces: Truma, Trumas Meiser, Chala, Ureshis Hagez, Hamatanos, Ufijan Aben, Ufijan Peter Rachamor, Ustei Hachuza, Ustei Racharamim, the Gezel Hager, the Kari Mias Matana, and the last one of these, all of these are called gifts. Shmamina, Mikabli Matanas Havu, Shmamina. And so we see that they are all considered Gezel Hager, considered gifts. And so as a result, this would be considered a gift. You wouldn't have to be subject to the giving of the Meiser Behema, and as a result, we are ready to continue with the analysis of the Mishnah. But for that, stay tuned to tomorrow's discussion. Have a great day, everybody.
How are you making the distinction between Gezel or Ger earlier on? It's a difference between this is someone who stole it at night, doesn't have to return it?
Whether rooms that are always empty.
Yeah. Got it. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'll be right back in. Sorry, I don't understand your question.
Yeah, I got a little bit lost there. When we switched, we said the Gezel or Ger was different from the other concept of
Geneva.
Geneva from the Ger.
Correct, because Geneva is subject to the 2 times penalty, whereas Gezela is subject to Zela is not subject to the 2 times penalty. And so the fact that the Torah is specifically referring to the 1/5 penalty, so that shows that we're not talking about Geneva, where there would be a double payment, the kafel payment. It must be talking about Gezela.
And the Gezela is, but we're talking about Ashim, Chomesh Ashim, though.
Right, because we're talking about where somebody robbed somebody and then swore falsely about it, and then and so as a result, because they've sworn falsely about it, they have to pay not only the principal, but they also pay a 1/5 penalty and bring in Asham Korban.
And that's
it's not required if you do Geneva. When you do Geneva, you just pay double, and there's no swearing about it.
All right, okay.
Because remember, the difference between Geneva and Gezela is that Gezela, you know who took it from you, right? They robbed you. You saw who took it from you. But Geneva, they stole it in the middle of the night. You have no idea who stole it. And so that's why there are different rules for those two different things.
Right.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay.